Okay, cool. It's getting recorded. Thank you, Peter. So how's everybody doing? I hope that's nods all around. Tonight I am so excited to have a special guest, which this is David McKeever. David, you can say hi.
Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here.
So I wanted to bring David on because they were so involved with the gender and sexuality conversation at the Youth Sahavas, and not just having it, but really what I appreciated so much about what David brought was that there was an acceptance and a lack of shame in the conversation that normally doesn't happen out in the world. And so I was really feeling like I wasn't qualified to have this conversation. I mean, I know some of what Bob has said about homosexuality or, reincarnation and how, the soul flips back and forth, but David does this in their job full time. This is who they are. And so I really thought that it would be more appropriate if they led the conversation. And so I'm going to turn it over to David so they can introduce themselves. And David, I would love for you to share a bit of your background so that anyone who didn't read the email has an idea of really how qualified you are for this conversation.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Margi. Like I said, I'm very happy to be here. I had the opportunity to lead discussion groups about gender and sexuality at Sahavas, and the conversations I was having with those kids was just like so incredible, so insightful. These kids are so like beautifully wise, and it was just so amazing to like be in Baba's love with them. And so I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to be in Baba's love and talk about gender and sexuality with you all. I think this is an intergenerational conversation, so very excited to be here. I have just finished a 4-year degree. I got my Bachelor in Arts in Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. Before that, in high school, I took like some women's studies classes, or just always centered kind of like this kind of feminist practice in my thinking and in my being. I've been out as queer since I was like 13, 14 years old. I knew I was gay from a young age. I've come to understand myself as a non-binary person now, as someone who I don't really feel manhood or womanhood perfectly encapsulates who I am. And so, yeah, in coming into this conversation, I really just want to hear what like I don't think this is necessarily a space for debate, but I think it's a space for conversation. I think it's a space for knowledge. It's a space for trusting each other and trusting each other's experiences, and also being open to, keeping our hearts open, keeping our souls and minds open to what is actually here. I think gender or biological sex kind of gets in the way of our soul. Like, I feel like very much strongly it's a part of the Maya, of the ignorance, of the illusion. So I would love to engage with you all in this conversation and just share what I know and feel as like living as a queer and non-binary person, but also hear from you all as well. So thank you so much.
So David, would you share just a little bit of your Baba story so that, because I think what's so unique about you is you have all this academic experience, but also you have an inner relationship with Baba. And David has shared with me how much his queerness has been a part of his relationship with Baba. And so I think that if you could start out by talking a little bit about that, and then everyone else who has questions, just raise your hand, and I'm sure David would be comfortable answering. I'm putting you on blast there, but
yeah. That's good all good with me. So my relationship with Baba started out, from when I was born, no, but in essence, yes. I've always been somebody very interested in what love actually means and what love actually is. My mom, she's actually in this call, Cindy James, came to Baba when I was around 8 years old, and I kind of had this idea of who Baba was. I remember first feeling Baba in this picture that my mom took at the center, like in the water, like a reflection off the water of like Baba's face there. I remember feeling that so strongly, but not really getting that Baba was like God in human form or like any of these things, not really understanding what it was about. And it wasn't until I started attending the Youth Sahavas in Myrtle Beach, where I came to Baba really beautifully and intensely through the relationships I formed with people there, through the love that I felt with everybody there, through the beauty and stillness that is the center, and through the liveliness that it becomes when Sahavas happens. So that was not the first time, but it's the first time I felt Baba, but it's the first time I understood what Baba was. I felt, I mean, now in my life, I would say that like Sahavas is a place for me to feel this inspiration of Baba and everything, but I've also started to incorporate Baba into my everyday life too in a more meaningful way. I was able to finally like visit the center on my own, like and stay a night on my own recently, and like that was a like crazy transformative experience for me, and just like feeling that and feeling this. I've always imagined Baba, like what resonates with me the most is the love. It's like God is love, you know, and how to love God is to love nature, is to love yourself, love each other, love family, strangers, people you don't want to love, you know, like to love in what the essence of love is. And that is what is divine. That is what is God. And I hold that love as a method in my daily life. And I owe so much of that to Baba and to the Youth Sahavas and to just Baba. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thanks, David. So I do want to open up the floor for everyone to ask David questions, but then also, David, I think you do know some of what Baba has said specifically about homosexuality. And so if there are no questions yet, would you be able to just sort of talk about that and put that on the floor so that we're open for conversation about it?
Yeah, for sure. I one of the things that let me just get it up real quick so I don't just talk out of my head. But yeah, so one of the things that I find really interesting and cool, this is a little write up from Jeff, I believe, but like in it describes how Baba had many followers, like of his core followers who actually were gay or queer or lesbian. Elizabeth Patterson being one of the co-founders of the Mayhair Spiritual Center in Myrtle Beach. Norina and Don Stevens were both bisexual. You have, you know, Charles Haynes and Christopher, who I love them so dearly. They were at the Youth Sahavas this year, and I've known them for years. They're just so awesome. And then a lot of Margaret Crass dancers were gay. And also, I think a lot of us maybe would agree that we've encountered a lot of Baba lovers who are queer in our life, you know, like it doesn't just have to be the people who are close to Baba, it's us too. Like a lot of queer people feel very close to what Baba is and who Baba was. Like, you know, people who are heterosexual or straight, all of us have to understand what love actually is, and transmuting lust into love is what is in this little write-up. Homosexuality Baba said, like being gay or being queer is a part of the incarnation process. It's a natural part of coming into and being in a body and as a soul, you know. As we go through a series of incarnations, we say if you are a man, you might like where you're attracted to women, and then you are in your next incarnation you're a woman, you might still feel that like residual energy, if you want to call it that, you know, that kind of attraction in your next life, which can manifest as a lesbian. And that goes back and forth. And I think what the most profound part of that aspect of this is that like we just are all trying to figure out like how to live and how to love and what that actually means. And, you know, and Baba puts stuff like lust in our life to kind of like to get us to understand what love actually is. And I think a lot of people have this perception of gayness where it's just not about love, which it is, you know, like being queer is a part of loving, is like a way of knowing love, is a way of understanding yourself. Countless queer people will talk to you about how they kind of tried for so many years to like love in a certain way or to love the people that society told them to love, and they failed to do that. And then they come to understand themselves as queer people, and it feels right. It feels like to me, as I came to understand myself as queer and later as like genderqueer or non-binary, like it feels right to me. It feels like when I saw that picture of Baba reflected in the water, you know, it feels like what the essence of love is. So that's the queerness. And then here's the more difficult thing is we don't, in the time Baba was living in, you know, trans people or non-binary people were not very visible. They were there. Don't get me wrong. Queer and trans people have always existed throughout history. That's also kind of this other fiction that we live in, is that like this is something modern or new. Maybe the identities or the communities are new, but people have always been gay. People have always felt differently than what their body or what society has told them. And there's actually been many cultures which have accepted people who are what we now call queer or transgender. So I was reading through discourses. I've been reading through discourses on my own recently, finally starting to really get to it. I think I'm at an age where I kind of have the knowledge to like, okay, I'm not just reading words, I can actually understand what these are trying to say. But I think one of the most incredible things I was reading, I think I'm just going to read it directly because, and I'll talk about it as I'm reading it. But it's in like page 325 of discourses, and it's the little tagline is freedom from sex-ridden imagination. So this is what Baba says, and I'll kind of just read the quote and I'll talk about it as I'm reading it. So bear with me. If one is transcending sexual duality and trying to understand the experience associated with the opposite sex, sometimes one actually exhibits the traits usually associated with the opposite sex. For example, some aspirants in the male body at one phase or another actually put on clothes of women, talk like them, and feel them, take on their habits. But this is only a passing phase. Now, when I was reading this earlier in the week or earlier today, I can't remember, I had this moment where I was like, oh, I don't like that. Like, to me, I being gay, like, there's this kind of idea of like, and I'll finish that quote, don't worry, I'm getting to it. I'm getting to my point. There's this idea that like, it's just a phase, or like, it's just this, or like, it's just that, or whatever. And I read that and I was like, as somebody who, dresses feminine sometimes, or knows people who are transgender, or who do what Baba was talking about in the bare essence of it, I was like, but they're not wrong for doing that. They're not like bad people for doing that. They're not like more steeped in the illusion than anybody else, like, it's just something that is. It's also like, I know it's very affirming. And this is where I kept reading on. So I had this moment of discomfort and I was like, I don't like this. I don't like what you said, Baba. Had this little moment of contention with him. And instantly in this next line, it made sense to me. When inner understanding of the relevant experiences is complete, they neither experience themselves as male alone nor as female alone, but as being beyond the distinction of sex. The experiences connected with the male and female forms are both accessible and intelligible to the aspirants who have transcended sexual distinctions. They remain unaffected by the limitations of either, because through understanding, they have freed themselves from the limiting obsessions characteristic of sex-ridden imagination. And to me, I was like, oh, there it is, Baba. That's what you're trying to say to me, is that it's like, we are so like, as being non-binary, I've kind of come to understand this myself. When I read that, I was like, oh, that's what this is. Like, it's kind of me trying to understand, like, oh, I actually am more than just this male body, or this, or maybe I'm not just putting on like female clothes and trying to be that. I'm actually trying to be a soul. I'm actually trying to have my soul be what my body is. And, in feeling the past incarnations that I've gone through and the past experiences I've had, and letting myself feel that. And I think the biggest thing here, I was also reading about Maya, and it was like the part about like, it's, oh, I just lost my train of thought. It was so good. I swear it was so good. Anyways, I'll come back to that. But like, I was reading that and I felt like a sense of, oh yeah, about judgments, like, who are we to judge people and where they are in their life? Who are we to say that like a transgender person is just a person in a male body, like going through a passing phase of putting on like female clothes, like because what I know and what I've studied, but also what I've experienced and what I've felt and lived is like, queer and trans people deserve to exist and deserve to call ourselves what we want to call ourselves, deserve to identify how we need to. Because I also know this about queer and trans people, because I am one myself and I also engage with them, is that we are not like, we come to this realization that gender or the sex or the body that we're put ourselves, or that we've been put in this incarnation, is not the end all for us. It's not the be all end all. We understand that we live in a world that some people might look at us and see that we're doing things wrong or that we are wrong, but we're not trying to say that we are right. We are trying to figure out ourselves. And I think, some of you might encounter people in the world who are defensive or who are angry or who don't have, or like, and are queer or trans. And what I would say to that is that like, everybody deserves to be a human. Everybody deserves to feel the emotions that they're feeling, to have the have the experience of the soul that they are having, you know, like, and it's not up to us to tell other people how to live, to crack down on things because we think something might be a danger to somebody, you know, like, it is up to us to love each other. That is what it ultimately is about. It is about loving, it's about finding the soul in each other and loving them, and not trying to just be like, oh, well, I don't understand this, and so therefore, like, I'll love you, but I won't really understand you. It is also about understanding. It is about love and understanding. And when you get to know somebody's soul, when you get to know yourself as beyond the body, as beyond manhood or womanhood or sexuality or anything, or race or physical ability, when you get to know that, you really get to know the soul. Here's my other aspect that I want to highlight though too, is that material experiences still matter when we're in a material body. You know, like, this is my other thing where I kind of think about a lot, is that, like, it is actually important to understand, because not all of us humans are Baba lovers. I mean, we all love Baba without being conscious of it, but like, a lot of people in this world don't have access to something like Baba, you know, or they can't find the access to it. So we have to understand that, like, I don't know. I just think it's important to listen to queer and trans people who also aren't Baba lovers, and to listen to them about what their experiences are, you know, like, to listen, and across the board. Like, I think this goes for, we live in a world where a lot of people are coming to understand the systems of power that we live in. And I think Baba would agree that the systems of power and domination that we live in right now are not conducive to love. So a lot of people in this world recognize that, even if they don't know Baba, and they are able to fight for that love, even if they don't know exactly what they're fighting for, because everybody at the end of the day will get there in their own way. So yeah, that's my little spiel that I've been thinking about. Yeah.
So David, you're just so well spoken. So Michelle, their older sister, is my best friend. And so David is little sibling, right? And getting to see David at the Youth Sahavas speaking their truth with such clarity and enthusiasm and love, and really just filled with Baba. I mean, they filled the room with Baba when they had this conversation, which can be very, very uncomfortable. And so David also led a discussion group, or helped lead a discussion group that was about gender and sexuality among the kids. And they encountered some very difficult topics. Am I right in saying that? You know, it wasn't that all the kids there were super accepting and super open. And so I do encourage you guys that if you have questions, or there's anything that you're not sure of, to ask David, because that's your person. You know, David will enter this conversation with so much love and so much acceptance. But until you guys have questions, I'm going to ask David some questions just to kind of keep the conversation flowing and going. So have you encountered that you feel that the Baba space is an accepting space of queer, trans, or anyone who's different? Because I really think that, you know, what queer people represent is actually just people who are different and break the mold, right? It's not that they're weird, it's just that they're different, and that makes people uncomfortable. And so really, like, what's been your experience in the Baba world?
Yeah. I mean, I've had a vast array of experiences in the Baba world when it comes to acceptance. And I would say overall, I think, like, I do feel an acceptance, because I think Baba accepts me, or Baba accepts queer and trans people, or people who are marginalized or different in any way across the board. So I will feel that. Like, I feel that. And I feel that even in the moments when I've had, like, contention with somebody, or when I haven't agreed with somebody, I still feel it. Still feel an acceptance, because I think Baba people, like, more so than many other people I've encountered, are open to, like, listening, or open to knowing, or open to, you know, like, each other and to love. So, but I will say too that I have encountered some frustrations with, like, rigidity around, like it's kind of like, I experienced this out in the outside world. It's like, oh, you're fine, you can be who you are, like, you can be what you are, but like, and like, we tolerate that, but we don't accept it. It's like, you can be who you are, but we won't do anything to make you feel like this is also your space, you know? And what I point to there is like I think there's this is maybe only a Youth Sahavas specific problem, and it's a nuanced problem, and I actually don't really want to get into it. But the example that I've encountered is like the gendering of cabins at Sahavas, or just gendering in general in Baba's words, for example. Like, it doesn't always ring easy with me. It always like I read it and I'm like, there's these terms male and female, and I know from my work that there are so much more, that those terms have very loaded connotations and are used in a lot of loaded ways to boil people down to their genitalia or their biological sex and this like kind of thing, you know. And I think that's kind of like is frustrating for me to encounter. But what I've kind of come to understand is that in the words, at least, like Baba understood that he was speaking to a very particular time, you know, when he was saying all these things. He's trying to reach certain people in very specific ways, you know, and he wasn't like he didn't have like he wasn't using this language of queerness or transness or non-binary, because that's not the language that he was dealing with at the time. And so it's up to me then, or up to us, to understand how we can read these words differently, how we can read a word like male or female and actually understand what Bob is trying to get to there, you know. Because I also know a fact about biological sex is that there actually aren't two like biological sex. There's not just male and female. There's not just XX and XY. Chromosomes actually come in a whole host. Like it's a whole host. I think there's maybe at least 6, like, but probably even more. That's even seems limiting to me. Like there's actually more chromosome combinations that go into making up biological sex. Intersex people exist, you know, people who have both the sex characteristics. So we have to understand that like even this like Baba talks about dualities and binaries all the time in his work, and what he says, or his life, and what he says is that like we should not stick to them. Like that's not like what, like there's not these extreme opposites, even if we perceive them, you know. It's up to us to get to beyond those binaries, to get to beyond the illusion of them. And so I think it's really like that's where I've encountered my frustration with Baba, is like sometimes I read that and I'm like, okay, that's frustrating for me, but then I remember this and I've come to learn this. And like, especially at Sahavas, it's a great place for this, because like something I said in one of these discussion groups was like something I believe firmly, and that's why I said it, was like Baba was Baba, and he was there, and he was God in human form, and he was being who he was. But we are also Baba too. And now that Baba is not in his human form, it is up to us to figure these things out. It's up to us to understand the world that we are living in now. And we can't just rely on like we can go to something like the discourses and read it and feel so much truth in it, but we also have to remember that like we create the truth too. We uncover the truth too, because we are Baba. When we are tapped into who Baba really was, we are Baba. So we are able to kind of expand these things as well, and to grow these things and not be so stuck in some sort of like text that we had. Or like I think also like there's this tendency, it's not like Baba was very heavy on like no religion. This isn't scripture, you know. This isn't like you have to follow all of these things, and this is all of these things are like it have to say the same, you know. Like that's not what this is about. It's about understanding, and it's about love. It's about all these things. So yeah.
Thank you, David. We have a question. We have another question. Josh from Australia, the land down under, has a question. Hey, Josh.
Yeah. So I've just got a plane going over, but yes, I feel like this is so much a question. It's just like a couple of like Baba like anecdotes specifically about this that I've picked up a lot of. You know, I'm a queer man myself, so I'm very interested in it. You know, there are things like Upasani Maharaj would often like wear drag, you know, dress up, you know, in a sari and do all this stuff. You know, there's so much queerness around Baba. My favorite Baba story ever is the story, I think it's in Erich's book. It's about a Hijra perfect master. And for those who don't know, the Hijras were this sort of third gender in India, you know, so there were, you know, a group of people who sort of would exhibit it sort of feminine characteristics, but they might have been like assigned male at birth, you know, so and then they'd be sort of ostracized. But in this story, it's so good. This perfect master who's a Hijra, just basically like she's just really awesome, and she actually uses a miracle, and like basically a tribe tries to trick her, and they try and by getting her to marry 2 men, where one man is dressed up as a woman, right? This is such a gender story, and then they ask her for a baby, And she says, are you sure you want a baby? And they're like, yes, we want a baby. She's like, are you sure you want a baby? And they're like, yes, yes, we want a baby. And she's like, okay, you'll have a baby. And she actually did a miracle. And the man that had dressed up as a woman, his belly started to swell, and and then he had started displaying signs of pregnancy. And I mean, look, like this is just a story, but it's so fun. And Barbara would tell this story to Erich, and Barbara would really love getting into it. And in the end, these Klansmen had to go and beg forgiveness from all the Hijras in the community and ask them to pray to God, so that God would basically abort the fetus, so that the guy wouldn't die in childbirth. So look it up. It's in Erich's book, one of Erich's books. It's great. Yeah, another thing, interesting thing. I've got so much. Okay. Hazrat Babajan used to slap people if they called them a woman. Hazrat Babajan would be like, I'm a man. Like this fiery, perfect master was insisting, to be sort of like that they were sort of transgender. So when I talk about Hazrat Babajan, I always try and say he and him, because I don't know what that perfect master can do beyond, they're still very much around. I don't want to get on his bad side. Another thing is, I think this is so important to talk about. When I was in India, I came across 3 Indian men that I think, this was in 2016, that were married, that I strongly suspect were queer, and just having relationships on the side in secret. And I feel like Barbara just wants people to be honest. So I feel like, and part of it is just saying queerness is someone just honestly being themselves, and being out of the closet, and I mean, a lot of them can't, because like literally, it's massive societal pressure and things like that. But yeah, I just wanted to raise those points, and I've got more later. And also the question for you, David, like I feel, where do you see the importance of queer people in the Barber movement going forward into the future?
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you so much for all of those. That was like one after the other. I was like, oh, I love that. I love each and every one of those little anecdotes you shared. So yeah, that's a great question too. I feel like the future of queer people in the Baba movement is where Baba community is, like where queer people have always been in the Baba community is like there. And I think now we also deserve to like have that acknowledged openly, like without casting it aside as like something that is like just part of an identity, a body identity that we're just kind of like it is important to recognize who queer people are and who trans people are, and to understand too that like there is something that we are doing that is aligned, that has always been aligned with Baba's work, with Baba's like life, so like we can continue that and carry that on because we know it very deeply, because we've gone through a lot of this work of undoing the Maya of the world, of undoing the illusion and the ignorance, and like because we've had to, because marginalized people across the board, and I'm not saying just marginalized people do this, I think Baba people do this in general because we all know Baba, but like we've been doing this like outside of Baba too. We do this in the everyday world, like because we have to, because we've had to do it to survive. It's not just like something that is like we kind of try on for size here and there. It's like we actually have to commit to this in our everyday life, just like everybody here has to commit to, knowing themselves, knowing Baba more deeply. So I think that like the future of queer people in the Baba movement, in the Baba community, is like we are a part of this future very deeply and very, I hope, openly and like loudly, So.
Thank you, David. All right, we have some more questions. Jill.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, I'll show my picture as I try to keep this very short. There's so much I could say, but I'm an elderly person. My father was one of those who invaded France and Normandy to overcome, the evil going on there. My uncle was in a Nazi prison. My cousin was killed in Vietnam. I bring a background that I do not think an army of women will ever defeat an army of Chinese men. So I'm quite practical. about these things as well. But the thing is, I agree with everything that's being said about the, I would say, the awakening of the fact of, people being born with very different tendencies. And I'm very impressed, with a lot that I hear, even when some of it bothers me. And I won't say more about the bothering part at the moment. You can probably guess from my background. What I do want to emphasize is to take care with these stories. Hazrat Babashan, I've done a lot of research into her life, spent a lot of time at her samadhi. I've written an essay about her life and things which I should publish at some point. And yes, she did not like being called Ma, but it was explained it's the Muslim way of, as Erich explained one day at the trust over tea, the Ma in the Islamic faith means it means the one who still gives into the world. And the father, or the male, is the one that overcomes the world. And there are women who, and so Hazrat Babajan did not want to be called Ma because she had overcome the world. She was one with God. And so in the Islamic faith, of which I believe she was born into, being called Ma was an insult to the fact that she was a God-realized woman. But when I study her life and look very closely at it, she was a very female perfect master. And I won't go into all the ways that I see that, but I certainly never experienced Erich. I mean, Erich to me was the height of a feminine awakened masculinity, his strength, his knowledge. Mani was, as close to a goddess besides Mera, but I would say not a god, but a goddess. So the distinctions to me are important, and getting the Ma and Pa thing about Babajan is important because it has a much deeper meaning. And it's important that these things be given out as accurately as possible. So I'm going to be quiet for now. I really want to listen and try to learn from what everyone's saying and not say much myself, because there's a lot to process.
Thank you so. I was just going to say thank you so much for that. I really appreciate you sharing, and also I think it is important too to understand these nuances, especially because I think a lot of us in the room come from white Western cultures, and to be able to understand that that what goes not to project, maybe not project, but not to understand that there's these cultural nuances or religious nuances or backgrounds that are very much real, very much a part of and that we just don't have the knowledge, So thank you for that, Jill. Yeah. Marianne, I see your hands up.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm not going to share anything about my background right now. What I'm going to comment on is, because this is being recorded, and I'm going to be bringing in, after this is on Zoom, a couple of young people who are young and gay and trans and who've never heard about Mayor Baba before. I'm just making a request because, David, what you're bringing here is so amazing. If you could speak a little slower, slow down just a little bit.
Yes,
Not change
I'm so sorry.
not change your style, not change your style. You're beautiful. You have a beautiful style, but just slow down a tiny bit. Okay. Because it is just precious what you've brought here. Thank you. And I'll sign off. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that note. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Go ahead, Jeff. Did you have something to say? Now you're muted, Jeff.
I was just saying there are a few elderly people here that can't. No, I was there. You spoke beautifully, David. It's fantastic. I just happened to think of something. When I first met the Mandali, they related to me as I had always known myself. And they were just meeting me for the first time. Why? Because they saw the essence of me what I had always known myself to be, they were tuned into that. How, in other words, they got to the essence behind my personality self. And so it was pretty extraordinary. So a lot of it is trying to get to the essence of who someone is, whatever their gender variation happens to be. I mean, I relate to you, David. I'm not relating to you because there's a Davidness that stands out more than whatever approach that you choose, and that's the lovely thing. So anyway, that's just something that came to me, but yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Jeff. Love you so much. Yeah, just so on something you were just talking about too, about like getting to understand the essence of it. I think, Margie, I think maybe you were there in this, it was the Sahavas meeting. I think Buzz was telling us, I think it was Margaret Krask was talking about her experience with Baba, or like somebody was asking her like, oh, how did Baba treat you as a woman? She was like, Baba didn't treat me as a woman. He treated me as a soul, and kind of getting to this idea that like the soul is genderless, the soul is identityless, and like we have these bodies and these identities that we have to take on to kind of operate in this world. But when we actually there's actually a way to go beyond that and to actually get to the soul and treat people from a soul level. And from there, if you don't have an understanding of somebody and their identities, you do understand them because you understand their soul, and you don't have to know all the ins and outs of how they think and feel and everything, but you can know their soul. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Jeff.
Yeah, and just to say,
oh, you're muted.
Jeff, you want to mute?
Yeah. Why would we be kept from someone we love, want to spend our life with? It's kind of, how fair is that? The heterosexuals get away with the loving who they want. Why can't everybody have the one in their life that brings them closest?
Exactly. Beautifully said.
All right, and Diane and Terry, you guys are on mute if you want to click on mute.
So as an old queer couple, I feel like we should put in our 2 cents. I think I was brought to Bubba by a friend, but I remember seeing photographs of him, and there were always people around him who were you could just tell that they were all over the place, and that made me feel so good and so safe. And it was part of, because I've always been a seeker, but I've never really, religion and that kind of stuff just didn't work for me. So when I met Baba, plus if you look at Baba, you can see he's like the mother father himself. So I mean, right there you have it going all around us. And I feel that the hearts are the same. We all have these hearts that love, and whatever is on the outside of that, or the soul, but I come from my heart and more often, it doesn't really matter. But if you truly love, you love everybody. You love, you even love the bad people. I mean, I send love to Trump, and he's not my kind of person, but there's enough yuck in the world and hard stuff. So I want it to be in all communities everywhere, and certainly in the Bubba community. And I feel like you're very brave, and I really love what you've done. And I love how you speak and how you share. And this night was just a total gift to me. So thank you very much.
I'm going to jump in since we're successfully unmuted. Hi, David. So we know Cindy, we know Michelle, now we know David. Yay.
Oh,
I'm excited. And I almost wore my purple Baba Zoom shirt. We would have been twinsies, separated at birth.
Purple's my favorite color too, so it was almost fate.
Queer, I guess. And Momo said this thing in the chat too. for those of us who have spent most of our lives coming out as queer or lesbian or gays, coming out as Baba lovers is very interesting. Or when we hear people tell their coming to Baba story, they're very similar to our coming out stories. So you are all part of the same, you all get toasters. We also have a queer child. Yes. And
Non-binary.
Non-binary. With a they them.
Yep.
So we have a they-in-law. But you know, it's very interesting because we are politically 100 billion% behind it. But we're also kind of old ladies, and we have to switch. We have to remember to do the pronouns correctly, to not lock them in where they don't want to be locked in. And we do it all the time with, I don't want to say we practice, but we're real with people in our lives. And one of the biggest stumbling blocks that we have heard back, and I can understand, is couldn't they have chosen another word besides they? Because I'll say regarding Hannah, they're coming over, and then just Hannah shows up, and you know, it's been confusing, and
but we'll get used to it.
We will get over ourselves without question.
I mean, we had a daughter for 29 years, and now our daughter is our adult child. So, and because we come from coming out as lesbians in a very feminist kind of way a lot of years ago, and I was in my 30s before I came out. So I was like already
an old lady,
an old woman, yeah. So, but I was a radical feminist, and Baba brought me to humanity, and now I believe that my life is humankind. It's not about being a woman or a man. And that's a really big thing for me. You know, like we just watched the Barbie movie. I don't know if any of you have seen it. And the thing that was hard for me was that they had to slam each other. It couldn't just be coming up together and being unified. And that was really, really difficult for me. And Baba brought me there in so many ways to know that that was correct. And then, you know, you come into this community and you meet people like Jeff and Tony and people that are men that well, he's a young man. I'm talking about older people my age.
I pointed to you, Momo.
Yeah, you, Momo. But I feel that we really get to interact, and hopefully we know that the people that are showing up for especially these Zoom meetings, because they are so intimate and they are so all over, we talk about so many different things, that I feel like Bob is in these Zoom boxes with us. I can't even see it as separate. So I've come a long way with Baba, and he's really helped me be more equal in my life. And, but I always knew from photographs and everything that he was welcoming to queer people. I never skipped a beat with that. And I've never had that experience before. So it was really I'm a Jew, so I don't know if you know anything about them, but men and women couldn't even be in the same room, you know, at a wedding or an event. So this is how I like it, Baba's way.
And since no one else's hands are up, I'm gonna, I have a statement and then a couple questions. One of the statements is that what you said really resonated with me about, because I'm gonna ruin your quote, but I'll say it how I heard it. We've all had so many incarnations, male, female, male, that it's the same soul. So of course, non-binary makes the most sense, because it's just this lifetime that we're in this body.
Totally.
And so thank you very much. That was a great way to say it. And then I had some things came up, and I don't know if this is the right forum, but I was fascinated it's been a long time since I've been in college courses, but David, when you were taking your women's classes, were you the only male? Were there other men? Did people question why you were there? There's that part of your life. I mean, I could pour a glass of wine, Baba wine, of course. And then
Yeah.
the other question is just how you are with the Baba community that's older and you are so authentic.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you both for everything you just said. I really appreciate it so much. I first want to, I'll touch on your questions in a second, but about like the pronoun stuff, I understand. Let me do this. Ta-da. I use they, them pronouns myself. But also like, to me, pronouns aren't the end all and be all of my gender. And I think a lot of people understand that. It is very important to, use the right pronouns and to try and practice. And it sounds like y'all are doing that. And I really appreciate that. I'm sure that your child is very appreciative of that as well. And I think it also is a process. It takes time. It's a different thing. Like, even I know that like for non-binary people, like we've been around for a while. These words kind of become new though. And we kind of find different ways to express like being non-binary, and like they, them pronouns are kind of like easier. They actually didn't used to be the most common pronouns for people who used like, or who didn't identify as a man or woman. There used to be pronouns that were like zers with like a z, like, or like here's, like stuff like that. So, but what I think like it might be easier for they, them pronouns because they kind of exist. We do use singular first person pronouns in our language. It's not always the perfect way of doing it, but it's also like, does create that confusion. Sure. It's just also just one of these things of like, we have to work with what we've got. And I also know that like people probably would have a harder time using pronouns like zers and like the common that, and like where we are at in our current moment. But what I know about these things is that they change and they evolve and they grow, and we find ways to understand ourselves. I even feel like they, them pronouns don't really encapsulate all of what I feel my gender to be or my being to be. They're just kind of convenience for me. I also kind of feel like close with she, her pronouns at times, or close with, those other pronouns like zer. Yeah. And I feel like, so that's just language, it's language, and it's hard for us, and it's important to understand language. It's also important for us to not like feel so much shame around that we're not doing it perfectly all the time or something like that. So that's what I wanted to address that first. And then your first question about being in those women's studies classes and stuff. And I actually never really experienced a sense, like a question of like, I mean, there would be times I would feel like I mean, there would be certain situations where I am the only masculine presenting person in a classroom. Like that was true, but it never felt like I was an outsider in those spaces. Like it always felt like a sense of inclusiveness because it was women's gender and sexuality studies. So it goes just beyond the women's studies aspect of it. But but even in like classes where I feel like I was just around women, they were always so like, it always just like, we're here for this reason, we're here for this reason to understand gender more deeply, to understand, feminism more deeply, to understand like what it means to like be in community with people, what it means to fight for liberation and what liberation actually is. So there's this sense of like, the identity doesn't matter as long as you're approaching from a place of curiosity, love, and like unity, and that was always what I did in my classes. And I never experienced anybody being like, why are you here? Because the whole class would get asked that, we all be asked like, why are we taking this specific course? What is the reason behind that? So that was always just so, it's very interesting because I never, especially like in my earliest classes, sorry, I just caught myself talking fast. I'm gonna slow down a little bit. In my earliest classes, I found that I was taking mostly studies that were centered around like feminism, and that started to evolve the more I got into my studies and stuff. But like, that never has left me, like I still very much, even when I was younger, I mean, identifying as a gay man for many years, I understood that like feminism as a point of entry for me before I kind of understood how feminism is like as something like I want to stand in solidarity with women without understanding how like feminism is actually for me as well. It's actually for queer and trans people. It's actually for men as well. you know. I think it's very important to understand that like there's kind of tendencies on all gender like orientations and stuff where people will attack other genders, you know, like we see it with like misogyny, we see it with like people who have very intense feelings or of hatred towards men, you know, and I don't think that that's helpful too. I think I've come to understand, like I've gone through those feelings myself of like hating men because I like have been wronged in some way, or I feel like masculinity is like there's an application to it in this world that is violent or used for violence in many ways. But what I've come to understand is that that's not helpful. And yeah, so I think that like, as to your other question too, about like the question was about like older generation approaching older people and being authentic to myself. I think what I've learned, I mean, for so many years, being queer and trans, or just being the person that I am, like I felt a need to suppress myself or mute myself or not like be fully who I am, or to make concessions on what I know to be true, what I feel to be true. And I think I've reached a point in my life where I'm not going to do that anymore. So it's actually something that I was able to practice at Sahavas, engaging with like the older leadership, like Buzz and Linda there. And what I found with them is that, I mean, they're just such incredible open people to like have conversations with and to have connections with. But they like, what I realized is that I'm never going to approach anybody, especially in the Baba community. I think actually I would say this exclusively for the Baba community. I'm never going to approach anybody as if we are in opposition, you know? And I see such an incredible importance for building being intergenerational and what that actually means, you know? And that means that the old people have to accept the young people and the young people have to accept the old people. And we also have to remember that age is just one of these things as well that is a part of like the illusion, is a part of Maya, you know, it's a part of something we have to work through in this world that is not actually the end all be all of our existence, you know. And I have so much, I mean, I've gone through parts of my life, or I hear rhetoric, or I've internalized rhetoric where, you know, old people are bad and like I hate all old people and I can't wait till this generation dies out because then things will be great once this next generation is able to take power. I don't believe that, and I don't think anybody should believe that, because like, one, I think that's counterintuitive to like life and like loving life. It's like you shouldn't be wishing for a whole generation of people to die out so change can happen. I think what I find frustration with older generations at large, not necessarily in the Baba community, is there are older people who are very stuck in their ways, but they're usually entrenched in like power and domination as well, and they're not really thinking about love, you know. So at the end of the day, I see love as a timeless thing, as an ageless thing. You know, we are able to connect with each other no matter the experiences we have. And I love talking to older people because like older people have lived more than I have, you know, and they have this knowledge that I can understand as well when we share together. Like I feel like I have wisdom and I know that older people have wisdom and we can share it. It's just like it's about like, I think seniority is important, but I also think it's not all that there is too. It's like older people can approach us with like, we know things too, you know, we've learned things too, but like to not shut off from other people's knowledge and other people, no matter who they are. So yeah, that's my thoughts on all that.
All right, we have some more questions. Jeff. Jeff, you want to unmute?
This is kind of slightly different. Can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me.
It looks like you're freezing, Jeff.
This is just taking in a different direction. I wanted to, what's that? Hello?
It looks like you're freezing. Maybe your Wi-Fi isn't good where you're at.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's okay. We'll
It's
just
better.
go with it.
I just want to ask a quick question of Terry and Diane. Did you find prejudice toward you, you know, from the Baba community?
So
did you encounter that?
I have to be honest, at this stage in my life, I've been out for so long in so many places that I don't even think about it anymore. You know, it's just who I am. And I think I get seen that way. So the people who aren't going with that kind of situation probably just don't talk to me, or, you know, don't get, you know, I haven't felt, no one's verbally said anything. And it's been years that we've been at the center here in Los Angeles. And at the beginning, the only separation I felt was there was a big Persian population that spoke Farsi and were very, you know, family oriented with each other. And I felt left out, and now I don't even feel left out of that anymore. So I don't think so. I don't think that there was any.
Good.
I did. Diane and I, we left one day when we first started going to the center. This is some years ago now. And I said, we need young people and queer people here. And the next weekend, I don't know if you all know Michael Caine, but Michael Caine walked on with
Aaron Hemian.
with Aaron, a gay man, and they're both gay.
No, he's not gay.
Who?
Sean
is gay. Yes, I'm sorry. I thought it was Sean. Okay,
I've got my Hemian
it's wrong.
wrong.
It doesn't really matter, but that's what came the next week. And so, you know, I think, and they've stayed, and not only stayed, but have become a huge part of how the whole center runs. So it's the
Yep.
way of life, I guess. It's just that we got to get used to it.
Good. I'm glad that there's that you felt comfortable,
Yeah.
you know.
Did you ever feel
Yeah,
anything?
you know, I mean, we walk through when we're at the center, we hold hands. We are just, we don't, it's not that we don't care what other people are saying. We're not silly. We're not going to walk out in public. And if we ever feel like there's an energy that would.
We've traveled
With our
places that
safety.
we hadn't felt safe holding hands or, you know, looking more connected than just two girlfriends or something. But on the most part, we just are who we are. 35 years. You know, it's hard to be anything else.
It is hard, though, that, you know, part of the center's history is so it has some homophobia in it. And you can talk to your blue in the face about understanding it, but it was there. I wasn't a part of it, but
the thing is that it's really different now. And
yeah, it's different. Yeah,
okay.
right.
So
Yeah.
That's where I was going.
good.
So I was going from the fact that it was that in, you know, a couple decades ago, to the fact that David is explaining how he is seen as who he wants to be. That is incredible growth.
Yeah.
And us too.
Yeah, and Charles Haynes, I don't know if you can hear me. Charles Haynes really led interference, suffered tremendously, but he led interference for all the people that came, all the homosexuals and who came after him. Bobby used him, and even though he had to suffer tremendously, it was a very sad chapter for me to experience, but thank God he was willing to do that.
All right. Thank you, Jeff and Diane and Terry. All right. Up next, we have AO.
Oh, Marion, how about me?
Yeah, I think Marion's hand was raised.
Okay.
first.
Okay. Go for it, Marion.
Yes, I'll make this kind of quick. I just kind of wanted to make my statement because I appreciate this so much and what you're doing, David. And Baba always gives me a kind of a thump on the right temple about certain important things, and that is the name David. So everybody's name is beautiful. This is my son's David, my son-in-law's David, and David has just been all woven through my life. So I'm especially listening to this and reflecting on, I really was fortunate to be born in this life with very little prejudices. I had a lot of curiosity about anything, like me or different from me. So I'm very blessed with that, because I didn't know anything about gay or straight or any of that when I grew up in the Midwest in a small town back in the 30s. You know, there's nothing like that happening. And so anyway, what in this life, so I don't know which life I made such a big transition from a lot of male incarnations to female, because I've been so very female identified in this life and have had to go through women's liberation and be dragged through that. And it's like, oh my gosh, because I was an advertising executive and came up the ranks back in the 70s. You know, the women's movement just kind of getting really kind of started with the only women with all these men. And there was not, the word sexual harassment wasn't in anybody's vocabulary yet. So I had to deal with all of that, and being an assertive woman where I was born very submissive. I was much more of a submissive type. So Baba gave me, I'm so grateful, these past life vignettes that I've gotten, like movies, of my lives as a woman, always given my power over to a man. Baba didn't show me any male incarnations, only my female ones, going back into medieval times. And it was like the husband I had in this life, that soul I had married in another life, dominated, men telling me how to dress, what to do, how doling out the money. So until I got very liberate, and then the women's movement talking about, you know, using words to define our genders. When Ms. came up, you know, Ms. Magazine or Ms. MS, wow. I remember me and my friends, we just were like, that's it, that's it. So I still use Ms., you know. And so all this liberation. So I'm very, very fortunate that I'm so open and curious, but I was given all these experiences of what this life, I came as this woman identified person to come to a point of liberation and not giving my power away to anyone anymore. And if I do notice it, taking it right back. And therefore, really just kind of being just, it's sort of, I'm nobody. I look in the mirror, I think, oh yeah, I'm a woman, but it's sort of like, I don't know who I am. It's sort of, I'm everything. So thank you very much. I just want to make that statement because I came up through that time. As I say, I was born in the mid-30s, way back in the Midwest, and it was quite a journey getting here and now and being just who I am. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, up next we have Ao. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, you're pronouncing it correctly. Good job. First off, I've been walking a spiritual journey for many, many years now, and I've been queer my whole life, and I've identified as they, them for most of it. And but I'm new to the Baba community, and I was unaware of Baba until relatively recently. And as I've begun exploring more and more of Baba's works and his writings, and as I've been introduced more and more into him, into his love and into the things that he taught and into the community around Baba, and it is really nice to see how inviting it is. And this talk has been really great to kind of see how the community is. And I know that not every community is going to be, or not every aspect of the community is fully welcoming, and I understand all of that, and there's a bit of rose-tinted glasses, but I really, really appreciate seeing this, and I wanted to thank everyone for putting this on, and to be so welcoming and to put such an effort into understanding gender and queer. And thank you, David, so much for being willing to talk and to share your story and to share your truth. So that's all I wanted to say. Let's say thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That is very beautiful to me, that to hear that you've been able to come into this space and feel like you don't have to, fight in it, to be I think my favorite part of being a Baba lover is the fact that I often feel like I don't have to fight to be understood, and there are instances where I've had to, but it's not the baseline like it is in the rest of the world. It's not at every corner. If I'm in a Baba situation, I have to prove myself or prove that this is right or do this or that. It still comes up, definitely, for sure, but like there's so much ease here. There's so much like grace, and I'm grateful to be able to extend that as well. And I'm grateful for everybody here for extending that grace too. So yeah, Wayne, I see your hands raised.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, great. This is wonderful, David. I'm so delighted to be here. And I just felt like coming on for the record and saying I've been queer all my life too. I've been a Baba lover for 52 years. I heard of Mayor Baba through the gay liberation movement in 1971 in San Francisco. I was a drag queen for a period, wearing Baba buttons. There's some vignettes here, but there was I bet you appreciate that. There's a long story in history to being comfortable as a queer gay person, gay man in the Baba community, but and we've come a long way, and it is totally different now, and I agree. But so is society. So is society. I just wanted to say one more thing about that. I lost my train of thought. Anyway, I've been with my husband Gary for 42 years. We've been to India together. We met Erich, and he met Erich and Mani and Mara. We felt very accepted there. I was in Mandalay Hall the first time I ever heard the Hijara story told by Erich in person in Mandalay Hall, and it absolutely touched my soul. But all the stories touched my soul. So anyway, I'll leave this with a Baba quote, which came from, inspired by you, David, because at the beginning of your talk, you talked about understanding over just acceptance and tolerance. We need to understand. Well, Mayor Baba said this. He wrote this in a letter to Minta Toledano, I think in the 40s. These are the words of Mayor Baba, our beloved Mayor Baba. The gift of understanding is more precious than any other attribute of love, be it expressed in service or sacrifice. Love can be blind, selfish, greedy, ignorant, but love with understanding can be none of these things. It is the divine fruit of pure love, the rarest fruit or flower of the universe. It has been called the sweetest flower in all the world. Age cannot wither it. It grows more lovely as it casts off its outer garment, disclosing its unseen beauty within. Meher Baba. Thank you. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Wow, that's so incredible. Yeah, thank you.
Wow. This has been so much more than I even imagined it being. David, thank you so much. You really, and I'll say from someone who's attended the Youth Sahavas for many years, and I think the Youth Sahavas is a very special space for the safety that it creates for the expression of anyone who's queer or even just identifies as being weird, not even related to sexuality. I just think we've created a space where like, if your special talent is that you can like dislocate your shoulder, you're celebrated to like get back on stage and do it. It's just a space of acceptance of like whatever you show up as, you can be that. But David, I want to highlight again to you how much your ability, and I think Bob has really placed you in a special role where you're extremely educated and you're extremely well-spoken and well-read, that you really are becoming a leader in the Baba world here. And I saw so many kids look to you, not just because you've lived their experience, but also because of the skills that Baba's had you learn, right? And it's incredible. And I will say, as a straight woman who identifies as like loving being a woman, I hope that I never have to reincarnate as man. Not that there's anything wrong with men. I just think being a woman is like the best thing ever. It is the best feeling in the world. But what I will say is, something that happens very naturally is that myself wanting to make everybody feel accepted and loved is that there can be like a feeling of walking on eggshells and not saying, afraid that you're going to say the wrong thing or mess up. And David said something that spoke to my soul so deeply and just gave me this feeling of like naturalness again. Is, David, I'm going to paraphrase, and I would love you to speak more to this. But they said we had a big meeting where David sort of just brought up the conversation, because so many of our campers do identify as non-binary. And that if you do slip up, that there's no need to feel shame, that someone who is grounded, and I'm kind of paraphrasing what you said, but basically the groundedness in your essence of being non-binary is not affected by me using the wrong pronoun. And so if we all remove the shame around saying the wrong pronoun, it actually creates more openness. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll just keep going, right? Instead of making such a big deal and identifying anyone who's queer as different, because ultimately you don't want to be different. You want to just be accepted for who you are. And if there's a slip up, there's an understanding too. And I will, if you have more to speak to on that, I would love to hear it, because it really changed my whole perspective on feeling comfortable.
Yeah, I can say a little bit more, I'm sure. I always have more to say.
That Leo rising always likes to be center stage.
Oh yeah, even though I retreat a lot of times, I do like to come back to the spotlight. No, I kid. My ego's not that big. I feel like it is so important to, I especially think we have the privilege of doing this as Baba lovers with each other, of like, and also I just know this from living in the world as well. It is like to let go of that shame, or to let go of, like, even in the face of somebody being defensive to you, like even if you do encounter somebody who gets really upset at you for not using their right pronouns or whatever, or for misgendering them in some sort of way, or to using a name for them that they don't want to be called. But like, I think even in the face of people who aren't like approaching you from like, I try to approach people from like, I know it's difficult to change. I know it's difficult. This world we live in teaches us one thing, and to have people be like, actually, I think you should use another. I know it's difficult to adapt to that. And I come from a place where I'm like, I'm not going to, I mean, not always. Sometimes I'm also allowed to get mad if somebody slips up, but I usually reserve that for people who are in my everyday life, who are like, who know me and who are continuously not doing it. Like, I'm not going to get mad at somebody if I like know them and I don't speak to them every day and like, and they mess up, But even in the face of people who do get upset, who do feel defensiveness against this, my advice is to just continue to not let that, like, to not internalize that shame, to understand that they're not trying to get you to feel shameful or bad, to understand that they've had to live in a world where they are constantly having to prove themselves, and the least that they're trying to ask out of you is to just like, hey, I want to be called in this way. I want to be addressed in this way, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing that people have intense emotions. Everybody, as humans, we all have very intense emotions, and to be able to remember that shame and guilt are not helpful emotions, to remember that, like, and anger can be an important emotion too. That's the other thing, like these things, or not, maybe, I don't want to say important, but I don't want to say like useful towards love, like shame and guilt won't get you to loving God more deeply, and to let go of those things, even in the face of somebody trying to make you feel like that, or even when what you believe, if you mess up and you feel bad about messing up about somebody's name or their pronouns or something, like, let go of the shame, and remember that, like, you are human, you're allowed to make mistakes, and they know that too, probably. That's the other thing, is like, because they've had to, like, I've had to live in a world where I know that every day when I'm going out and just encountering strangers, they're looking at me and they're seeing me as a man, they're seeing me in a certain way. I know that when I approach a room with people who aren't strangers too. And I know at the end of the day, especially in a community like this, especially in the Baba community, there's so much there. I almost cursed. There's so much love here because had so much passion that I wanted to use a curse word. But there's so much love. And that is what is important, is that, again, like, these words will fail us, we will not use the right words sometimes, and that's okay. Like, it's not about that. It's about understanding too. It's about, like, that quote that you read for us, Wayne. It's about understanding. So yeah, let go of the shame, let go of the guilt, let go of the worry, so. Yeah.
Should we go to Diane and Terry?
Yeah.
Thank you. So we had to do some legal work with our lawyer today, who is a queer man, married for many years, adopted 2 sons. And as I'm listening to us today here, I'm thinking about something he said. And he told us that, it used to be that you would know who was queer and who wasn't. And then he says, but when you look at people nowadays, you really can't tell. And I just realized what that meant. And it was just a really nice thing. So I wanted to share it.
Sure, we're all queer. That's
We are in our own way.
Exactly.
We're all
Exactly.
different.
Yeah. I've come to understand queerness beyond sexuality as well, as like being queer at its core. I mean, I think there is important to reserve calling yourself queer for like queer people, for like the sexuality aspect of it or the gender aspect of it. But I think there is like a queerness that even like, maybe this sounds controversial, Baba has a queerness, it's a different, it is, if you are straining against the norms of dominant and the power structures of a dominant culture, which I think again, I've said this multiple times, the power and dominance that is built into our current systems is not conducive to love. I'm sure Baba would agree that he is right there straining against the dominant culture, So like queerness does go beyond like sexuality. It goes into a like a positionality, it goes into like, this is who I am and I want to be like, and I want to fight for liberation. I want to fight for a radical politic or whatever, for lack of a better word, a radical way of being, so yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. I am so appreciative of you, and your passion comes out so much that I feel inspired. Like, I've got lots of passions that I don't always talk about, right? But seeing you and the impact that obviously, you and I have talked, so I know that Baba's guided you here very clearly, right? And even, of course, for the queer movement, it's very, very special, but also your passion for everyone is so special. And I just want to encourage you to keep going because you're so awesome. But I think that probably sums it up, unless you have any closing words that you want to share, David, or anything like that.
I do have one thing I want to do. So I usually like to, and probably other people do this too, maybe not. I like to do Maribaba callings, but just by random, and I wanted to do one for all of us here. So I'd like everyone to kind of like close your eyes or situate yourself in a way that you feel like you are opening this book too, because we're all are in the oneness,
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Give me a second. Do not fear suffering. You should look upon physical and mental sufferings as gifts from God. They bring their own lessons of the futility of the passing and of the intrinsic worth of the eternal. Do not get disheartened and alarmed when adversity, calamity, and misfortune pour in upon you. Thank God, for he has thereby given you the opportunity of acquiring forbearance and fortitude. Those who have acquired the power of bearing with adversities can easily enter the spiritual path. Do not fear suffering or blame anyone for it. According to the law that governs the universe, all suffering is your labor of love to unveil your real self. In comparison to the infinite bliss you experience on attaining the I am God state, all the suffering and agonies you go through amount to practically nothing. Jai Baba. Oh, amazing.
Oh, beautiful. I mean, that was so perfect.
Yeah, wasn't it? Always is. I've never actually read that one before too, and I feel like I do Maribaba calling all the time. So like, it feels great.
It's like Baba's God or something, and he knows what to do.
Yeah, right? Baba's God? What? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you so much. And this is going to go on YouTube, David. So if maybe I'm plugging you here, but if anybody has more questions for you or wants to continue this conversation, number one, are you open to continuing the conversation? And if you are, where can people reach you?
Yeah. Oh, there's a request to reread that Maribaba calling real quick.
Sure.
Yeah. Sorry, I tried to slow it down too, but I guess I'm just a fast speaker. All right. Do not fear suffering. You should look upon physical and mental suffering as gifts from God. They bring their own lessons of the futility of the passing and of the intrinsic worth of the eternal. Do not get disheartened and alarmed when adversity, calamity, and misfortune pour in upon you. Thank God, for he has thereby given you the opportunity of acquiring forbearance and fortitude. Those who have acquired the power of bearing with adversities can easily enter the spiritual path. Do not fear suffering or blame anyone for it. According to the law that governs the universe, all suffering is your labor of love to unveil your real self. In comparison to the infinite bliss you experience on attaining the I am God state, all the suffering and agonies you go through amount to practically nothing. Jai Baba.
Hey, Barbara.
As to your question, what was the second question, Margi?
Just if people want to get a hold of you, how can they find you?
Okay. Yes, am definitely open to hearing and learning things. I will also say, you can reach me. I mean, my best way is email. Maybe is there a way to like send out email, or I can just put it in the chat real quick?
I can get it linked in the description. I just feel like this conversation is going to be heard by a lot of Youth Sahavas.
Yeah.
They might want to reach out to you. That's why.
Yeah.
It goes on YouTube, David, just so you know.
Yeah.
You're going to be YouTube famous.
Oh, wow. So email is good for me, david.mckeever7@gmail.com. Instagram is also a better way to reach me as well. David.mckeever is my Instagram handle. So I would say too, I'm definitely open to having conversations and to talking about gender and sexuality or anything, especially related to Baba. I will also say that when it comes down to like nitty gritty stuff about gender and sexuality, Google exists and is a much more knowledgeable resource and accessible resource than I am at most times. So try and work out things there first. But if you want to talk more with me, if maybe there's interest in more of like talks like these, I'm definitely open to it. I'm open to continuing to be in love and community with Baba people. So yeah.
Thank you, David. And I'm proud of your boundaries.
Yeah.
Before we have a little moment of silence, I do just want to let everybody know that Jeff and I are doing a intergenerational virtual Sahavas. And if you'd like to be a part of that, just shoot me an email. My email is margaret.connor1998@gmail.com. And I will send you the registration link. We're basically going to do September 2nd. It'll be an all-day event. There's going to be an arti and prayers. I'm going to try to get some of the Youth Sahavas to be able to sing and perform at the arti. And then Charles will be doing a talk on his life with Baba. And then Jeff will be leading a discussion very similar to what we have here about the similarities and differences of how Baba shows up in our day. And then we will have free form conversation where more conversations like this can take place, but it's really just like open tea time. And there'll be lots of breakout groups in Jeff's discussion. But anyway, if anybody wants to be a part of that, just shoot me an email and I will send the registration. But once again, David, I just love you so much. You know, you're my little sibling. So I love you dearly. And I'm so impressed by you.
I love you so much. And I would like to thank everybody here who's watching posthumously. I think that's how you say that word. Maybe it's not. I see shaking of it.
That means we're dead.
I know. That I knew that. I was being a little coy, I guess. No, but to everyone who's watching afterwards, to everyone who's here, for those who have left, I just, from the bottom of my heart and from the depths of my soul, want to thank you so much for giving me the space, for listening to me, for sharing what you know. It's like we are all one, you know. It's like we are all Baba, and everything resonates so deeply with me. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's have a moment of silence, and then we'll unmute and do 3 Avatar Mere Baba Ki Jays. Beloved Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
Jai Baba.